Welcome, family and friends, to this service dedicated to celebrating the life of Elly Vissar. And a special welcome to those family and friends who are joining us on a live stream from around the world, including Elly's nieces and other family in Europe, all over the place. My name is Megan Vissar, and I'm honored to guide this celebration of life on behalf of our family. Before we proceed further, would you take a moment to just silence your cell phones, any other electronic devices you may have brought with you? Thank you. It may feel like just yesterday we heard Elly's voice, saw her smile or the glimmer of her eye, enjoyed a good meal with her, or some apple juice, or the bounty from her avocado and orange trees. In this time of loss, we come together to honor Elly, to remember and bear witness. In a celebration of life, we're reminded of the fragility of life, but we also celebrate the gift of living, reminded too of life's beauty in the passion of the human spirit, and the spark of light that shone so brightly for over 90 years through Elly. When Elly, Stephanie, and I met to plan the memorial for Bob back in December 2022, we asked Elly what she would have wanted to say to people who came to the service. And she said, "I am not a speaker, but I would want to say thank you very much for being here." I imagine Elly would say the same today. Thank you very much for being here. Let us join together in remembering Elly through a familiar ritual of gathering to share memories and to say goodbye. Robert Vissar Jr. and granddaughter Kristen Vissar will come forward now to light a candle of remembrance, marking Elly's physical death and honoring her spirit that continues to light the path of all who love her. Hear these words by Kathleen McTeague. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward with our lives, and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what has gone before. They too were drawn by the same vision of what might come to be. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. There are so many memories of Elly's life that we hold close. I only had the opportunity to enjoy Elly's company, or Obi, for the past few years. This service cannot begin to tell the whole of Elly's 93 years of life, but even if we fail to encompass every event over her nearly century-long journey, we can fully honor how she lived. Elly was born Elly Houtsanger, and I know someone on the live stream is probably correcting my pronunciation of her last name. The third daughter of Louis and Sophia. Is it Louis or Louis? Okay, great. Louis and Sophia. Elly's family living in Europe shared with us some memories of Elly. documented from conversations between her nephew and her eldest sister, Lydia, who is now 101 years old last week. Growing up, Elly excelled in Latin classes at the gymnasium, which was the name for her secondary school in Delft, where she grew up. She was the third daughter and always enjoyed playing billiards and card games with her older sisters. Elly met Robert Vissar during a trip to France with her sister Fika. Elly told me this story, and I wonder if many of you have heard it before as well. Fika had booked a room for both of them near the University of France and was more outgoing, one would say, than Elly. I was very shy in those days, but my sister never knew a stranger, Elly said. She was hanging out with these friends and these students from Delft University, and Fika met with a few of the guys, and one of them had a toothache. So her sister announced that she was going to take care of the guy with the toothache. And then Fika pointed over at Bob Vissar and said, you will take her, and pointed to Elly, out to dinner. Bob agreed, and Elly said she was not sure how this was going to go. But there was her husband-to-be. Through a series of stops from one dining hall that was closed to a restaurant, they ended up sharing a meal between them. Now, there is a discrepancy about who paid for dinner. But since Elly attested that Bob had been hitchhiking, so he didn't have any cash that day. But for the next day or so, they saw Paris together anyway, through one another. When Elly returned to Delft by train, 2 days later, a Bob Vissar appeared at Elly's mother's house and said, and that was it, Elly said. We just clicked. The following March 1952, when Bob graduated from Delft University of Technology, Elly typed up his thesis for him. When Bob applied for a visa for permanent residency in the United States, he proposed. They were married on May 17th, only a few weeks later. And when Bob moved to the United States, Elly had to wait for her visa for a short while and to gather the money to be able to move, make the long journey. So across the ocean, while they were separated, Bob and Elly wrote letters back and forth. In their letters, the love that would carry them through 70 years of marriage is crystal clear. On June 16th, Bob wrote to Elly, "What a life. The only thing missing is you." The radio plays La Vie en Rose, and that makes me rather sentimental. Darling, I'm going to walk over to the mailbox to mail this letter. Greetings to everyone. Much, much love from your husband, who loves you very much. Your Bob. Elly and Bob moved place to place for his work as an engineer for Shell Oil Company, to Texas, Lake Charles, Louisiana, New Orleans, Alaska, Canada, but California, right around here, would become their very favorite place after 3 separate moves here. Family and friendships meant so much to Elly. Since her 2 sons, Robert and Mark, were young, they would travel everywhere around Europe together as a family. Elly, Bob, and their children would also share meals together at dinner time whenever possible. Bob loved Elly's cooking, as many of us did. And until their final days living in their house in Palos Verdes, Elly would squeeze fresh orange juice for their breakfast. Elly and Bob enjoyed talking and keeping in touch with family abroad. Marianne, Elly's niece, shared that meeting up with Bob and Elly, whether in the Netherlands, in California, or southern France, in Brussels, Paris, or Barcelona, it was always a fun and jolly occasion, invariably accompanied by a delicious meal at a great restaurant. After Bob retired, Elly's social life and with Bob blossomed even more fully. From the breakfast club, to the dinner club, to the seniors' writing groups, or theater enthusiasts who met regularly, and those who supported the Palos Verdes Performing Arts Group, the Netherlands American Society, and the list goes on. The Peninsula Seniors. Elly and Bob hosted many social gatherings and themed parties at their homes, storied events filled with good humor and even better wine. Some of Bob's and Elly's dinner parties would involve lots of her gourmet cooking, and Bob would type up a menu of the things that she made for everyone at the party to receive. We even have a copy of one of them at the back for you to take home with you if you'd like. Elly and Bob have 5 grandchildren: Amy, Scott, Kate, Stephanie, and Kristen. And 1 great-granddaughter, our Josie. Elly would proudly point to her baby photos, who was just born in 2022, to Scott and his wife, Megan. Elly and Bob instilled the importance of education in their grandchildren, as they did their own children. Elly was immensely proud of her first-born grandchild as she became a medical doctor and neurologist, Dr. Amy Vissar, who passed away 4.5 years ago. During the pandemic, the time away from one another was trying for Elly and Bob. And her family has cherished the memories they were able to make with Elly, both before and after. The birth of Josie, Christmases in Palos Verdes, or with rambunctious kittens in Eagle Rock. Even in her final weeks of life, she recognized her grandchildren's faces and could still make a witty remark. After Bob's death in 2022, Elly felt this loss deeply, of course, and following some medical challenges, went to live closer to Robert and Mary in Katy, Texas, actually in walking distance from their home. There are things we may feel we lost out on with Elly, things we wish we could have said or shared together or asked her. The absence of Elly will be felt by all who loved her. And yet our hearts are full of memories, and we are surrounded by reminders of what makes her so special to us. These memories of all that Elly Vissar is cannot be taken away. They warm our hearts, and they walk among us. An author that Elly enjoyed, Jacqueline Winspear, wrote that stories are never just stories. And it's true. All the stories that Elly Vissar is made of, we are made of too. So I'd like to invite Elly's son, Mark, to share a few words about his mom.
I want to also thank all of you for being here. I'm Elly's youngest son. I'm going to share a few stories that my mother told me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that I took to get some of her history before I was born. But some of you may have heard one of these stories. So. My mother was school-aged during the German occupation of the Netherlands in the 1940s. Her father imported and sold cooking oils and syrups for flavored sodas. During the war, he had a hidden warehouse or storage place that the Germans never did find, and that enabled her family to be able to trade for sufficient food so they didn't suffer the hunger that some of the other the other Dutch did. Her father was also a distributor of Sun-made raisins. And my mom tells the story that she went with her father to a trade fair while she was quite young. And she ended up being the Sun-made raisin princess. Probably she was the only candidate. That stuck in her mind, and what also stuck in her mind was she remembers getting ice cream as a special treat on that day. So another story my mother told me, which kind of, you may not know, but she had a little bit of mischievousness when she was young. But she had a best friend named Lex, and she went to Lex's house while Lex's parents were away. And Lex's family lived on the same block as the movie theater. And she said she and Lex would hang out the window of the house and learn who was dating by watching who would go into the movie theaters together. Another memory that I actually learned from my cousin Marianne was that Lex's father, who was a veterinarian, gave my mother a black dog when she was 16 years old. And I had never known that my mother had a pet. So after graduating from high school, my mother worked as a secretary in the hydraulics laboratory at the Delft University of Technology, which happened to be where my father was a student. And as part of her job, my mother typed up notes the professors made when they were examining the students. So this is, prior to the Paris adventure, but my mother had typed up notes from the professor's review of my father, and she told me that he did rather poorly the first time he took the exam. And my father later told me that he did party too much his first year at the university. And then the next story is about my parents' honeymoon. So as Megan mentioned, they were married in May of 1952 after my father graduated. For their honeymoon, they hitchhiked through France on their way to Spain. I asked her if her parents knew that they hitchhike, and she said no. But apparently hitchhiking was a lot different then. On the way to Spain, they were picked up by a gentleman who insisted that my mother sit in the front seat and my dad sit in the back seat. But on the way back to the Netherlands, they got picked up by a female professor at university in France, and she insisted that my dad sit up front and my mom sit in the back. But the thing that surprised me the most is that on each of these trips, the person who picked them up also paid for their lunch at a cafe during the trip. So that's quite a deal. You go hitchhiking and you get a free lunch. Also it was mentioned that my mother traveled to the U.S. after my father, and she traveled on the New Amsterdam ship, which was part of the Holland America cruise line. My dad's father-in-law, my grandfather was a captain in the Holland America fleet. So because of that connection, my mother was invited to the captain's table for dinner every evening. The problem was that she suffered seasickness, so most of the time she wasn't able to eat. And to make things worse, she shared a cabin with a woman who brought along a barrel of kippered herring, which has a very strong fishy odor. Anyway, and then after she arrived in New York, she then spent 2 days on a train in a sleeper car traveling to Odessa, Texas, where she met up with my father. Now, I know that going from the Netherlands to Odessa, Texas is a really big cultural change. As most of you know, my mother enjoyed reading, working the daily crossword puzzle, needlepoint, gardening, and cooking. She made needlepoint Christmas ornaments that we received as presents every year for decades. And there are some cards in the back that you can take home that have photos of some of those needlepoint ornaments. She also made Christmas stockings and quilts, There's some quilts up on the stage, and these have become family heirlooms. Megan mentioned about the dinner groups. Some of our favorite meals that my mother made were pot roast, prime rib with Yorkshire pudding, ossobuco, lemon tart, soccer tort. And then my children enjoyed Sunday steak night, which was a tradition as well. My mother was active in the community, volunteered at the Peninsula Center Library for 20 plus years. Later, she hosted the meet and greet with the Peninsula Seniors Organization. And as you all know, my mother was not sedentary and was always moving. She regularly swam laps well into her 80s. She was also an avid walker, going for walks daily. And I know at the Canterbury here at RPV, as well as the Sunrise Senior Living Facility she was in Houston, she was known as the woman who walks the hallways, even when she was using a walker. My mother loved family, and she loved hearing about her grandchildren and her great-grandchild. And I'm going to miss her smile and her pleasant demeanor and her love. Thank you.
Again, as my dad just said, thank you for being here. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Scott. I have the privilege of being, obviously, Mark's son, but Elly and Obi's grandson, and father to Josie, her great-grandchild. For the longest time, I had no idea that Obi was not her name. I'll start there. I thought that was her name, and so I remember looking at an envelope, I think, or a letter that was, in their office, and it said Elly, and I had no idea who that was. Sorry, I'll lower this a little bit. Is that better? Okay, sorry. So I'll start that again. I remember reading an envelope or a letter that was in their office, and it said Elly Vissar, and I had no idea who that was. I was very confused. I thought, again, that was someone different than Obi. But a few memories I have of her, favorite things. Obi was a big, avid tennis fan, and I grew up watching a lot of sports, playing a lot of sports, but I could never understand or appreciate tennis until I started to watch with her, and she taught me many things. I learned a lot about tennis. Every time I see tennis now, I think of her, and I can appreciate that. I also always admired her ability to do the crossword puzzles, as Dad just mentioned, or the New York Times. What was the other one? I think of the Sudoku and the other puzzles that she did. Again, having a sharp mind well into her 80s and 90s, I was always impressed by. I never had the patience to sit still and do those things, but I, again, always admired her ability to do those things. I also obviously enjoyed very much all of the food she made. The pot roast is still one of my all-time favorite meals that she makes, and I will forever remember that and enjoy those meals. She also was just such a dedicated and hard worker, and I always admired the tirelessness that she showed and just commitment to family, to friends. And that's something that I just would love to continue as a legacy, is to continue to work hard. She also was furiously cleaning her kitchen, which I now have learned and taken to do as my own. And even still, she just obviously loved Robert and Granddad very much. And it was a sweet memory that they got to meet Josie when she was one. It was a very sweet moment and memory for us that I'll definitely carry. Yeah, obviously we've mentioned many wonderful things about her. We will miss her dearly, but we continue to celebrate the life. And so thank you for being here.
for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tom Booth, and my wife, Fran, and I were just friends of the Vissars, Bob and Elly, for so long. I remember how we got to know Elly, and it really began around 1991, and when I joined the Peninsula Breakfast Club, and Bob was president at the time, and after a year or so, and we got to be friends, I was invited to be a crew member with Bob on his sailboat, which was great, and people that crewed with him, like Edwinus, we got to enjoy Elly's wonderful avocado sandwiches, and so but that was great. A highlight of the sail was the sandwiches she packed for us, and then Fran and I really met Elly at the Peninsula Breakfast Club Valentine's Day dances, which was always great. So after several years, Bob and Elly invited Fran and me to join their dinner groups, and this was just so kind for us because we really weren't in the Palos Verdes, any real social groups, and this was just a wonderful introduction to what became our groups of friends. The dinners met at people's homes, and as it's been mentioned several times, Elly was just one heck of a good cook, and of course I always remember the formal invitations or menus at the dinners, and which were always in French, and it was kind of neat because they were placeholders at the table, and they were very formal couple and liked to introduce people and move us around. So we would always be sitting at different spots at the table, which was a neat thing. And so it was really nice to get on the small cards to have a menu. It brought back good memories and great meals. Elly was a heck of a good cook. And she always made the meals. She just never catered them. It was pretty neat. She was active in the community and in her personal life, and in one spot was with an exercise, and I walked myself, and I was down by the Peninsula Center, and I saw her across the parking lot, and I went up when we were talking, and she walked down from her house, so she had a heck of a walk. She was an active swimmer at the Y. She and my wife Fran went at the same times, and always groused about how some of the people didn't clean up their lockers very well. She was active at the library with the Friends of the Library. She was a volunteer at the book sale, and even when I go in there today, which I probably shouldn't, who needs more books, but Elly is still remembered and by some of the people. And at the Peninsula Seniors, there's a group called the Meet and Greet, and Elly really formed the first meet and greet, and she did a great job on it, had a big group of people that were coming. She was really well structured at getting people to talk to each other, and she set the chairs in a circle, had big groups of, had really a lot of people that were coming to the meet and greets, and they were really successful. And some of the people from today, I talked to the current group leader for it, and she certainly remembers Elly, and we're beginning to get back to the same numbers that they had when Elly was running it, but she did a great job. And and again, just today, post-COVID, we're slowly getting back. So I just have to say on behalf of all of her friends that we all miss Elly a heck of a lot. So.
Hi, I'm Elly's granddaughter, Stephanie, and the Dutch word for grandmother is oma, but when my older sister Amy was a child, she didn't quite get that one right. Instead, she decided that Obi was what we were going to call her grandmother, and since she was the oldest, we all just went along with it. When I think of Obi, I think of her sense of humor, I think of watching tennis on television, her handmade Christmas ornaments and quilts, eggs and cheese sauce on holiday mornings, her petting and laughing with my kittens, her calling her walker her horse, her Kahlua pie, and spending many vacations in Hawaii. The last time I saw Obi, she was sleeping and wasn't talking much, but she did wake up and say, "Hello, Stephanie." Then proceeded to point to everyone else in the room and say, "Stephanie, Stephanie, Stephanie?" So I like to think that that day she saw a room full of me. She also told me that she was following my career, and which she and my granddad were always very supportive. After I speak, we'll play a video that I made of her life, and every time I look through her and my granddad's thousands of photos, it's so clear to me that they really lived. I hope to travel like they did, have a wonderful family like they did, and to throw incredible dinner parties like they did. So much laughter and fun jump out of these photos. I will miss my Obi.
imagine there's more memories coming to mind from those brought by those photos. Let's take a moment of silence to let all that we have heard and seen settle into our hearts and minds. It is a good time to reflect on how you know Elly, what memories you shared together, and how our lives will be different without her physical presence here with us now. before we conclude our service, our family would like to invite you to continue to share your remembrances. Please stay following the postlude for light refreshments, which can be found on the patio at the back of the hall. There are also those small cards we mentioned, and I want to offer a special thanks to Elly's children and their spouses, Cindy and Mary, for all of their support in creating this beautiful service and for sharing their words. There is a finality in honoring Elly's life in this way. Yet in doing so, we can release ourselves to feel more deeply, to remember more clearly, and to let ourselves learn to live out what was best in Elly's life. Though we will continue to miss her, we take the truth with us, that love is stronger than death, that relationships continue, and that Elly, Obi, and those qualities that made her so unique can go on living in us. May we be granted the peace of acceptance and understanding and assurance in those things that pass from person to person through generations into eternity. The most of these, love. May it be so, and amen.